So these are the Graupner 10x5s. This is in GPS hold mode. I have my radio set to actually count flight time, and we'll see how this compares to my indoor flight test. There will be no inputs for me other than stabilizing it if there's a breeze or a draft, or if I have to do some throttle controls for altitude. Other than that, she will fly by herself. Today's a calm day, about 6 mile an hour wind gusts, which are very gentle compared to what we've been having over the last couple of days, which were in the 20s and 30s. So today we'll just let her hover. We'll do all our blade comparisons. These are the Graupner 10x5s. We'll go through the 11x5 Graupners, and then we have the Maytech 10x5s, which are carbon fiber. We'll try all three today, using the same conditions, same parameters, and we'll see exactly how they do. So the rest of the videos will be fast forwarded, just for the sake of time. This will be the initial intro for this blade, and like I said, we're going to start monitoring time, and we'll see where we end up. So one thing you will notice is that she's pretty much locked dead solid. I have increased my gains. I found that the stock DJI F450 gains at 100% are relatively low. Considering the fact that we're running 1600 grams, I found for the stock settings with no landing gear, no camera, no gimbal, 110 worked pretty well. Later I'll create another video showing what I had to do to achieve this level of stability, stability based on the payload and a lot of the center of gravity aspects that I put into this. So right now we're about 3 minutes and 27 seconds in, and we're still counting. Hope the camera can see this. It's going to be a little difficult to show, but we are at 327. We do have built-in telemetry, and right now the motor temperature is excellent. Receiver voltage is very stable. Receiver being what is actually being fed off of the system there. So first impressions of these Graupner 10x5s, they're relatively quiet, all things being considered. The DJI motors are known to have that high-pitched squeal and whine, but from an airflow noise, they're pretty good. I'm noticing that the quad with these gains, these elevated gains, which are pretty much well in the 190, 180 range, she has very good stability. She's locked in pretty well. Every once in a while I'm losing a little bit of altitude. You'll see that in the video. I do have her framed pretty high in the video on purpose so that we have a level threshold that we can measure her against. I'm also using the trees as my guidelines in the video so you can see how far she drifts in these conditions. Again, we're running the Graupner 10x5s. I'm slightly under half throttle, just one tick. If I go in through my controls, get you some numbers here. So my throttle is basically just slightly under half. which is unusual. Usually I'm at half throttle. But if you look at it, there's the tick mark, and that's where I've been holding her. I haven't touched the remote since. We're at 5 minutes and 59 seconds. She is drifting a little bit side to side. In altitude, every once in a while she'll drift up and down. But overall, holding very well. So at about 7 minutes, we started to lose a little bit of altitude. And I've noticed this to be a common theme with all the props that I've been using. When I get to about the 6-minute mark, I need to increase my throttle just slightly to keep her at the same altitude. I'm assuming it's basically the system's heating up, the battery's heating up, so there's more internal resistance. And the power consumption is also increasing. Again, these are assumptions on my part. I do not have anything on board to tell me what the true power consumption is. Really, it's been trial and error and measurement. I do have the telemetry set up, which if I go through the telemetry, I can actually see what my voltage is set at. And I do have my limits, and right now we're at 10.9 volts, and that's after about 7 minutes of hovering. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the camera, move it back, and I'm going to bring her closer to the deck here, just so that she has a place to land. And as you can see, we're losing altitude. We're at almost 8 minutes. I'm going to give her a little bit more throttle, and there's my first sign of a warning. So at 8 minutes, I'm starting to get my first warning on my remote, and she's reacting with the power indicator light changing from green to red, telling me that I'm on my first warning. So let me bring the camera back. So at 8:40, my warning, my low voltage warning is coming on, and as you can see it, she's starting to act a little weird. She's starting to twitch. That's a sign that she's starting to lose power. So we're at the 9-minute mark. My remote is warning me that I do have to fly back. So we're at 9 minutes and 20 seconds, still flying. As you can see, she's starting to really bounce up and down and act a little weird. Again, this DJI system has been prone to do that since day one. When I get to a certain capacity in my battery pack, she no longer has a very good GPS lock and hold, and that's common no matter what blade system I'm using, whether it be the Maytechs or the Graupners. It's just inherent within the system itself. We're at the 10-minute mark. The battery voltage under load is being reported in my telemetry at 10.8. Right about now, she should start coming down for a landing. So I'm having to put in more manual inputs. The GPS hold is a little weak. As the battery power actually goes down, I start to lose a little bit of that lock that I had initially when the battery was fresh. We're at 10 minutes and 51 seconds. 10.7 volts. I have increased my throttle slightly just to keep her at altitude. We're at 11 minutes and 10 seconds. 10.7 volts. And here we go. This is automatic, this is not me. And I'm shutting it down. And I don't know if you can see that, but that's 11 minutes and 18 seconds before she landed automatically. And these are the Graupner 10x5s. Next tests will be a series of blades, the Graupner 11x5, and then we're going to do the Maytech 10x5s as well. Alright, so this next test is going to be, once again, with Graupners, but these are going to be the 11x5s. We're running the same parameters. We're going to take off, we're going to do a GPS hold, we're going to hold altitude, and I'm going to leave the throttle alone, the remote alone, unless I have to recover from any adverse situation, whether it be wind or if there's a problem with the GPS. We're going to have the remote, my DXA, record the start time. And once she actually auto lands, that's when the test will be over. And I'll give some commentary as we go through the flight. So here we go, taking off. So first impressions with the 11x5s, they are much quieter than the Graupner 10x5s. She does react a little bit slower, very stable, but it doesn't have that snappy response that I found with the Graupner 10x5s. Once again, the remote is set to auto start once I'm at elevated altitude. And right now we're at 1 minute flight time, 54 seconds to be exact, and counting up. So from a weather condition perspective, we have very clear skies. Wind speed is about 6 miles an hour. We still have snow on the ground. Temperature-wise, we're just hovering above 38 degrees. But all in all, it's a very good day. So one thing to notice is that she's a little twitchy. The gains were originally set high for the Maytech 10x5 carbon fiber blades. So I'm running the same gains across the board on all three blade sets. But I have found with the Graupner so far, both the 10x5 and the 11x5, that she's a little twitchy when the wind hits her. There's a little bit more reaction and adjustment. I'm assuming it has to do with the stiffness of the blade. Weight-wise, the Graupners are about 1 gram lighter compared to the Maytech 10x5 blades. So here's my remote setup. Again, I'm just basically holding the remote just for safety reasons in case something happens, something goes weird. GPS is flying by itself. The radio is monitoring the time. It's counting up. I do have telemetry, and right now we're at 11.6 volts after about 2 minutes and 50 seconds. And what I'm doing is actually looking at my voltage. As it goes down, I do have two limit set within the software itself, meaning the DJI software. There's the first protection and then the second protection, which is the auto land. And I have my remote set up to match exactly my first protection level. My remote will beep, identifying that I have approximately about 2 minutes of flight time, assumed flight time, to come back and land. But I do fly monitoring my voltage. I do watch to make sure that I am not overworking the system. I can monitor temperature as well on the motor. And since we're flying outside and it's cold, the motor temperature is only at 58 degrees. So we're going to let it fly a little bit longer, and we'll see when she's about ready to land. When I get my first warning on my remote, I'm going to pull the camera back and I'm going to land on the deck, just because we have a snow-covered yard, and I really don't want to land on the snow, which is still about 1.5 feet deep in some areas. So what's interesting to note is that I just saw a wind gust and actually felt a wind gust now coming up and over. The trees are moving slightly, so you can actually hear the motors working to try and stay as locked and stable as possible. She does have a little bit of a vibration. Again, the gains are set really high. I'm over 180 on these gains. So here's a 5-minute time check. We just hit 5 minutes and we're at 11.3 volts. And that is actually load voltage being monitored through my telemetry module, that I have mounted in there. It's giving me motor temperature, and it's also giving me the ability to monitor my voltage on the load. So we're at 7 minutes right now, 11.1 volts under load, 57 degrees for motor temperature. As you can see, she's still hunting a little bit, but what's happened since the last flight, we're starting to get a little bit more wind gusts. It's starting to become more of a consistent blowing wind than just a periodic wind gust. So you'll see her drifting a little bit more. The wind is actually coming from this direction, blowing this way. And you can see when it's blowing that she's hunting. Every once in a while, she'll drop in altitude like you see here. That's really the wind. It's now coming in two directions. It's now coming this way. So she's really working a little bit hard to maintain the altitude and the GPS lock. We're at 7 minutes and 50 seconds. We're getting to the 11 volt threshold. I won't hear an alarm for about another 0.2 volts. So there's my first warning. I just saw the red light blink. So what I'm going to do is take the camera once again and move it back so that I have a place to land on the porch here. Alright, so now I'm just going to take the quad and move it over the deck. And there's my warning, as expected. So my warning is set to 10.8, and you'll hear it beeping on the remote as well as the light flashing. That's my early warning that it's time to bring the quad back. This is just me trying to get her back into the frame, so I am giving her a little bit of altitude. Alright, now that we're back in frame, talk about where we are. We're at 10 minutes and 22 seconds. We're at 11.8 volts, and the motor temperature is at 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Once again, we're outside. It's about 38 degrees, so it's relatively cool. We do have about 6-mile-an-hour wind coming from two directions right now. It's a swirling wind, so she's really having to work hard to maintain her GPS lock. We're at 11 minutes. 10.8 volts at 11 minutes. There's that wind gust again. You can see her reacting to it. We're at 11 minutes and 58 seconds, 10.7 volts. There we go, auto land. So we're at 12 minutes and 16 seconds. And as you know, I shut the motors off, the voltage does go up. We're about 10.7 volts when I initially started hearing that beep again. But we're at 1216 with the Graupner 11x5. Alright, these next flights are going to be the Maytech 10x5 carbon fibers. Same test criteria. I'm basically going to take off, going to establish a hover with the GPS lock, and we're going to let her fly until she gets to the first alarm, first warning. Then I'll bring her over the back deck so that we have a safe landing zone, and we'll let her auto land. And everything's going to be tracked on the remote from start time to end time. So here we go. So we're 33 seconds in. I've got her established into a decent lock, and we'll just let her hover and fly. So these are the Maytech 10x5 carbon fiber blades, made specifically for the stock DJI motors. It's got the built-in D-slot so that it locks pretty well. The GPS gains were relatively high when I set up these blades, and that's what I used for the rest of the test. You can hear it if I stop talking. The motor's switching on and off real quick. There's a little bit of a bounce to it, so I know my gains are too high for these settings. So what I'll probably do on the next flight after I'm done with these tests is that I'll probably drop my gains by maybe 10%, just to give it that little bounce. But all in all the tests were conducted with the same settings, same battery set. All blades were hand balanced. There it is, you can hear it. It's got a little bit of a bounce to it. I'm hitting a harmonic. We're at 11.6 volts at 2 minutes and 20 seconds into the flight. Now, I am a little bit biased to these blades. I do prefer carbon fiber over any of the ABS or nylon glass-filled blades. The carbon fiber does allow the GPS system to lock a little bit better. It's more responsive. So when I do my aerial photography, I do fly more with the GPS locked and the carbon fiber blade combination. When I'm just doing some casual sport flying, that's when the Graupners are put on. I do get a little bit more responsive flight time. Going to the 11x5 Graupners, she's a little bit more stable, I would say, but slow to respond. When I go to the 10x5 Graupners, she's a little twitchy. So it's basically a combination of reaction to gains. The higher the gains, the more reactive the system is, and the carbon fiber seems to like the higher gains versus the Graupners that want to be about 20% lower in the gains when I'm actually setting up between carbon fiber and the plastic blades. So I do have two flight parameters, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. When I'm flying my carbon fibers, I'm probably about 20% higher in gain than I am with my plastic nylon blades. Now you can see she drifted a little bit. There's really no wind right now, so I'm kind of curious to why she drifted. She's probably getting a little bit of interference or maybe a gust of wind coming from an opposite direction from where I'm standing. But as you can see, she picked up, reacted, and locked right back on. We're at 11.2 volts at 4 minutes and 30 seconds into the flight. These blades are definitely quieter than the 10x5 Graupners. The 11x5s and these Maytech 10x5s, I would say, are about the same level of noise. But you can hear that annoying hum that the DJI stock motors produce. It's just a high frequency hum. Now I'm going to move her back into the frame. So this is me putting an input into the system. I'm going to be as gentle as I can just to get her back in. She is drifting slightly. I can see from the trees that the wind is actually coming from this direction here, blowing in that direction. So we just hit 11.0 volts at 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Motor temps are at about 58 degrees. We just hit 10.9 volts at 6 minutes and 32 seconds. Here's a good example of those high gains with these carbon fiber blades. She's really stable. There's a very light wind gust of about 1 to 2 miles an hour. And you can see she's not really twitchy or bouncy. She's compensating for it real well. We're at 7 minutes and 15 seconds, and this is my first warning at 10.9 volts. So I'm going to move the camera, and we're going to proceed to land on the deck. So I'm going to bring her onto the deck now that we hit our radio warning. .8 volts, 7 minutes and 50 seconds. It would help if I actually got her into frame. Sorry about that. I'm too busy looking into the sun here. 8 minutes and 15 seconds, 10.8 volts. .8 volts, 8 minutes and 40 seconds. Right now. So that was me just giving it a slight correction. I want to keep her in frame. So I'm bringing her close to the camera so you can actually see how stable and even she flies. I'm going to get her away from the camera because we're getting to our limits. We're at 9 minutes and 17 seconds, 10.7 volts. .927 and she auto lands. So that was 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Total flight time with the Maytech 10x5 blades, and I do have to apologize for the lack of camera angles. Too busy flying and paying attention to my craft versus where the camera was actually pointed.